will talk about painting this fun and festive still life, and I will take you through the whole process step by step. To paint a wide tonal range like this, very dark windows, mid-tone objects with a lot of highlights and very bright lights on the candles, we will need to take a little bit different approach than we would with just a traditional still life. We will need to paint the light first, then we will paint local color, the color of each object, and then we will paint the darks, and the last step will be adding the highlights. Now I will walk you through each step in more detail as I will be working on my painting. I sped up the video quite a bit because I don't want this to be very long. I want this to be a kind of summary of the steps for still lifes of this type, or I should say paintings of this type, because you can paint any subject you want with this technique. And I have other videos on the channel that talk more about the colors and mixing and applying techniques. I'll leave you the links to these videos in the description below and also in the card. I carefully sketched out my still life with mechanical pencils, so my pencil lines will be very fine and precise. I have a lot of objects, so I need a good drawing to start with, and I'm going to spray my sheet of paper. I want to start on a little bit damp surface, so I'll pick up the excess water with the roll of paper towels and let's start painting. And like I said, our first step will be painting the light. Candlelight gives us a warm glow, so I obviously need some yellows to start with, lemon yellow and new Gamboge, but I also can see that the light is not the same everywhere. In the upper right corner it has a little bit of greenish tinge to it, and also in the lower left corner the light acquires more orangey tone. So I'm not going to paint everything with the same paint and also not with the same intensity, but I will vary on my colors even for this first layer. My second step will be painting object color. I'm starting to add mineral violet, which mixes with my warm yellows and gives me a shade close to those window panes. I'm throwing in some color for the light bulbs there on top, and also for all those little objects I see on the bottom. The windowsill, the candles, there is an assortment of little pumpkins and gourds there on the windowsill, and also there are like mushroom sculptures, I think they're made out of fabric with some paillettes sewn on top of them. They're really fun, so I'm going to paint their color as well. A couple of them are crimson color and there is one green one. Also need to paint that lantern, and the lantern will be very hard to paint with watercolor only, so I'm going to use a little bit of gouache to paint the details on the lantern. Okay, this is my second step. I let everything dry, and my third step in painting this still life will be painting the darks. I mixed a very dark purple. I mixed two staining but transparent colors, Phtalo blue and magenta, and I'm applying dark color on the glass behind my still life and on the window panes to a certain extent. With a flat brush, it allows me to pick up more color and less water and achieve darker tone much quicker. But I don't want my color to be all the same there. So I'm mixing in a little bit of Cascade green, a little bit of a Scarlet lake, and a little bit of olive green. And that gives me a nice variety, even in my dark tones. I do not use black in my watercolor, I mix my blacks, and mixing staining by transparent colors gives you intense but transparent deep dark tones. I have to use negative painting because some areas need to be left lighter. So I kind of paint around my objects, that's called negative painting, and I also use a second round brush to paint the areas on the window frame where it's in the light. And also if you look at those light bulbs, they're not all light or all dark, they have really bright highlights inside of them, They have mid-tone areas and they have dark areas, and I'm using the same dark to paint inside the light bulbs. After my watercolor dried, the first layer, when I did object colors, everything lightened quite a bit, so I will be adding local color as well in this step to some areas of my painting. You see I'm doing that on the caps of those mushroom sculptures. And using a small brush, I will start working on the details on the lantern. I simplified it quite a bit, just because I don't want to spend several hours painting it. But if you have more patience than me, then you definitely should paint all the beautiful details on that lantern. Like I said in the beginning, I sped up this video quite a bit. It took me a little bit over an hour to paint this. I just wanted to highlight all the steps because they're a little different, like I said in the beginning, from the traditional still life. So I'm starting to add the details on my different objects. And some of the details I will leave to the end when I will switch to gouache, and you will see my last step will be done partially with gouache. The right side of the painting is starting to take shape, but I can see already that some areas are way too light, so I will need to add more pigment in the dark areas. And layering your pigments like that keeps them transparent, but at the same time allows you to achieve the tonal range that you need. So don't expect your painting to be finished in one go. It takes several layers to get there with watercolor. And that's of course faster than oil painters that spend years working on the painting, so we're lucky with watercolor that we can get results pretty quickly, but it's still not instantaneous. We will have very few hard edges in the still life because of the light that kind of softly washes all the objects, but also because most of the objects are rounded. The only hard edge we need to worry about is the window frame, and flat brush works great for that. I think it's much easier to achieve a straight line with watercolor if you use a flat brush. The rest of the objects, the darkest area will be kind of a little bit towards the center, not at the very edge, because light washes around the round objects and the edges will never be as dark as the middle. Alright, I painted most of the details and now I'm going to use a stiff brush to soften everything. This is a very important step. Even if light looks like it has hard edges in the photo, if we paint it this way, it's going to look unnatural. So all the areas around the light need to be softened with a stiff brush. So I softened the lights on the candles, and I also need to soften the light bulbs because they have a slight glow as well. And that's what creates that glow, is slightly blurry, undefined edges. And like I said, I need to darken my background because watercolor lightens as it dries. I'm using a small brush because I have to carefully work around all my objects, more negative painting. I'm adding more color to my objects, more local color. A very intense crimson and kind of viridian green on that mushroom on the left. Also need to add more color on the candles. They are very light on top, but the bottoms, if you squint when looking at those candles, you will see that their bottoms are almost as dark as the darkest areas on the window and on the windowsill. And that's what creates the glow, is the difference between the white paper, that's our light areas, and intense multi-layered darks. More details in the light bulbs are necessary as well. Like I said, they have bright highlights, but they also have very dark areas where you can see the window frame through the glass. So that all needs to be painted. And now we're going to our last step. We're going to restore the highlights and some details because I didn't use masking. I'm going to use gouache and I'm adding highlights on the light bulbs. The handle on the lantern completely disappeared. I'm going to paint that with gouache, much easier than trying to save white paper there. I can add a few details on the lantern with a little liner brush. Few highlights on the candles as well. The tops are very well lit and I over darkened them a little bit, so I'm going to restore that. And it might be a little hard to see on the reference photo because I made it so small, but those mushroom sculptures, they have like little paillettes sewn on or glued on, and they're all different colors. So gouache is perfect for that. I'm using a tiny brush and I'm using light blue and light green and yellow gouache to paint those little paillettes. So all those small details make my painting come to life, give it a lot more interest and precision. And I'm using Himi Gouache, which is artist gouache. It has the same binder as watercolor, and I have a video on my channel when I test my new Himi set. If you want to learn more about Himi Gouache, just watch that video. I'll leave you a link in the description and in the card. Alright, we're almost done. I forgot to paint some cast shadows from the mushrooms on the window pane, so I'm going to add that real quick, and here is the final result. Fun still life with glowing candles, very dark window, wide tonal range, painted with watercolor and a little bit of gouache. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you let me know in comments if you found this useful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video here in Tammy Rap Studio.